Welcome back, my fellow board game enthusiast, to part 2 of the Aeon's End lore series. There is a lot to cover in this wave, including a 14-page short story written by the developers, so I'll be jumping right into it. A month or two after everything that happened previously, we joined the Breach Mage apprentice, Indira, on her final trial to becoming a fully fledged mage. In this trial, called the Ordeal, an apprentice is led deep into a maze of caves to survive on their own. Those who make it back to Gravehold after successfully navigating the dark and slaying any monsters they encounter are officially recognized as mages. And those that don't return are assumed lost forever. Now Indira got off to a particularly bad start. She got lost several times during her ordeal, until she eventually heard the voice of an old woman speaking in the distance. Following the voice, which she thought belonged to the elder Brahma, she came across a cavern with strange ruins carved into the wall. The voice drew closer, but before Indira could take another step, she was attacked by a needle mob. This creature of the dark is known for its bladed claws and rows of teeth, but fortunately is not very smart. Remembering her training, Indira was able to defeat Needle Mob with a spell she learned from Adelheim, the Consuming Void. Despite being victorious, Indira sustained heavy injuries during the fight and could no longer move. It was then that she encountered the owner of the voice she had been following. It wasn't Brahma, no, it wasn't even a resident of Gravehold. An old woman named Yen Magda and her traveling companions came to Indira's aid. Yen explained that she had been swept up by the void during the apocalypse and only recently arrived in the caverns, so she didn't even know of Gravehold's existence. Next, she introduced her companions. There was Quilius, who had been trained as an assassin ever since she was a young girl in the world that was. She was constantly looking for stronger foes to slay. Mazahedron was the last of the Henge Mystics, a group of male prophets, much like the conclave of sisters to whom Brahma had belonged. As with Yen, both Quilius and Mazahedron had somehow been dragged into the void decades ago. Thirdly was Geru, the beast man, who became Yan's oath-sworn protector after she had found him in the void. Geru had no memories prior to his encounter with Yen. Standing at the back and brimming with power is the void-born prodigy Desmodia. Desmodia was actually born within the void, raised by Yen after her mother died during birth. She had been living in the void for her entire life, and as such she had absorbed more of its energy than anyone else, making her essentially the strongest breach mage in existence. The final travel companion was by far the most obscure. Remnant, as he was called, was an ethereal entity. The void-given form. Yen theorized that he was born from a lost soul that lived in the world that was. Like Geru, Remnant had no memories of his past prior to his travels with Yen. In case any of you are wondering, it's never really explained how it was possible for Yen and her companions to survive within the void for decades and still be so young, though it is stated in several texts that time in the void flows differently from how it does in the real world. Years can go by in seconds, and sometimes a second can last an eternity. After the introductions concluded, Yen and her team was thrilled to learn that civilization was so close by. Following Indira's general directions, the group was able to make it safely out of the caves. Waiting for them on the outside was Brahma and Malistar, who were obviously alarmed at the arrival of the strangers, some of whom looked more like monsters than man. The hostilities only calmed down once Indira called out to Brahma, a name which Yen Magda instantly recognized. Turns out Yen had also been a member of the Conclave, however she was exiled by the sisters long before the first Nameless attacked the world that was. Her exile had taken the form of a ritual called the Black Mausoleum, which was supposed to place Yen into an eternal sleep. As for the reason for her exile, it was the mere questioning of the Conclave's teachings, or heresy in other words. The Conclave had always taken a pacifist approach, never acting unless necessary, as evident by how Brahma was content with merely defending Gravehold and punishing those who sought to return to the surface. Yen, on the other hand, called for a different approach. to proactively seek out and destroy their enemies. This difference of philosophies would eventually lead to a growing rift between the factions of Gravehold. For now, Brahma cautiously allowed Yin and her group to live in Gravehold. However, they were constantly under suspicion and carefully watched. Brahma even grew suspicious of Indira, stating that she had failed her ordeal by not coming back from her trial alone and should become a merchant instead. Indira, who had spent years learning the ways of the Breach Mage, was obviously not content with this outcome and chose to continue her tutelage under Yan's guidance instead. Still, Indira never resented Brahma. She knew both Brahma and Yin wanted what was best for the people, even if they couldn't see eye to eye on their methodologies. At this point, I quickly also just want to point out two new faces from Gravehold. Sparrow, the simple-minded soldier who believed everyone should just settle their differences with a good brawl, and Gex, the Breach Mage advisor who believed everyone had a hidden side to them. Barely settled into Gravehold, the suspicions on Yin only grew as her arrival beckoned the coming of a new wave of Nameless. First to slump through a void portal was the thrice-dead prophet. The hulking body made no attempt to attack and was easily slain by the Breach Mage vanguard. Only it didn't stay dead. Its corpse came back to life, growing bigger and spawning minions. This caused the mages some strife, but they were still victorious in the end. The body of the Nameless came crashing down, taking out a part of the southern wall and crushed 20 people as it did so. Then it rose again, stronger than ever. Were it not for the aid of Yin Magda and her companions, this would have been the end for Gravehold. After the combined forces killed the Nameless a third time, they had Quilius killed it an extra time to make sure it stayed dead. The fourth time's the charm apparently, as the thrice-dead prophet moved no more. Yet from its corpse a new Nameless sprang forth. The Umbral Titan, a giant worm, akin to the sandworms of Doom, burrowed to and fro within the ground and walls. It attacked the very foundation of Gravehold itself. In the shadow of the Nameless that towered so close to Gravehold, the civilians ran away in fear. One merchant in particular, the coward Ohat, pushed man and child alike away as he fled, only to stumble himself. The Nameless approached him and Ohat knew he met his end, but then a miracle occurred. From Ohat's shadow, a creature of darkness sprang forth and drove the Nameless away, until it was finally killed by the other mages. This creature only spoke one word, Uljamor, which then became its name. Uljamor would join the mages in their fight of future Nameless, while Ohat merely stood close by, cowering behind a shield Adelheim made for him. I know I keep hammering on how much of a coward this guy is, but you should hear his own words from his unique starter card Coal Shard. Afraid of my own shadow? Of course. The third Nameless to appear this time was the Knight of Shackles. Okay, pay attention everyone, the lore is about to get spicy. The Breach Mages of Gravehold instantly recognized the Knight of Shackles. How could they not? He was, after all, their old commander, Thraxer, who came back from the dead as a nameless abomination. Notice the wound on the stomach from the time Thraxer got ripped in two by a Rageborn in the previous video. As if to disprove any doubt about the resurrection of old Breach Mages, the Knight of Shackles possessed breach magic of his own and led an army of undead zombies who had Breach Mage crystal embedded in their eyes. In case you were wondering, due to the limited space of the underground, Breach Mages killed in battle weren't buried. Instead, their bodies were tossed into a deep dark hole, never to be seen again. Until now, that is. During the battle, Mist was especially distraught for having to fight her old commander, while Indira wondered if it was possible to turn the Nameless back into the mage he once was. Unfortunately, these two voices were drowned out during the battle, and the Knight of Shackles was slain like all the Nameless before him. The mage most intrigued by this development, though, was Zaxos. Zaxos had long researched the Nameless in secret, trying to find a way to turn their powers into tools. Yin Magda's travels through the void and the Knight of Shackles' existence fanned this spark of curiosity inside of Zaxos into a raging desire. He now knew it was possible for a mage to travel into the void and somehow gain the powers of a nameless. With Brahma's gaze distracted by her suspicions of Yin Magda, Zaxos was able to begin delving into blood magic along with recruiting followers who shared his visions. This new cult of blood mages came together in a secret cave where they would don masks to hide their faces while conducting their unholy experiments. And as often happens when dabbling with power beyond your comprehension, things go wrong, very wrong. Rather than make the powers of the void their slave, the cult of mages became slaves to the void. Out of the breach they toiled with, the hollow crown emerged. This nameless was rather unique in that it inspired awe instead of fear. Merely gazing upon the crown was all it took for the blood mages to become its brainwashed acolytes. The hollow crown led his new army to Gravehold so as to convert all who lived there. Fortunately, the mages who didn't dabble in blood magic were resistant to the crown's mind control, though they still had to kill the blood mages first in order to reach this nameless. After the battle, an investigation was launched into the cult, but it could never be determined who taught the mages blood magic. Zaxos, who due to some twist of fate wasn't present at the time of the crown's emergence, had escaped all consequences, be it from the nameless or Inquisition thereafter. Alas, the events did not even deter him from continuing his research alone and unabated. It was a dreadful night when the next nameless, Wrathmonger, would descend on all of Gravehold. At first, the people didn't even realize they were being attacked, as Wrathmonger only attacks you as you sleep, invading your dream with images of terror. It was Yin Magda, who could no longer sleep after undergoing the Black Mausoleum ritual, that first noticed the attack and proved to be the nameless undoing. This earned her a bit of trust. Trust that was soon lost again when the Gate Witch appeared. This nameless had met Yin Magda before in the void and was committed to chasing her till the ends of time. And so it did, till its own time ran out at the hands of Gravehold's mages. Two more nameless, the Magus of Cloaks and Maiden of Thorns, also attacked Gravehold at some point, though they didn't bring any significant lore with them. No lore, no screen time. This brings us to the final topic of the day. Somewhere during all these battles, Mist did what she's always done and go portal jumping after minions trying to escape. Only this time was one time too many. Upon trying to exit the void, Mist suddenly became possessed by some unknown being. She was no longer the Mist that everyone knew, but something else entirely. Still, the being had all of Mist's memories and acted loyal towards Gravehold, so despite the other mages knowing that Mist had changed, they accepted this new, and much more powerful version of her, with relative open arms. Unbeknownst to them, though, the otherworldly being had a hidden purpose of its own. But that, my friends, is a story for another time. Bonus lore drop time. In the flavor text for the Gate Witch cards, Nether Spiral and Infinite Enmity, we get confirmation of the existence of a multiverse. Here it states that during her travels, Yin Magda saw an infinite number of worlds, some still young while others already dead after being taken over by the Nameless. Countless worlds where the Breach Mages were victorious, and countless more where the Nameless had won. This doesn't really have any impact on the lore, but is nice to know in a meta sense for the game. Essentially, this means that when the players lost, that happened in a world destroyed by the Nameless, and the current world plays off in a scenario where players have won every time. That's all for now. See you in a future video, my fellow lore hunters.